Hey LaBrice, so I saw where you were having issues with the unit test for the Odyssey. And I want to first go through a couple reasons why I think you're having to take so many attempts before you pass the quiz. And second, I want to go over three questions that you missed and how you can think critically and look back at the text to figure out the answers and take your time so that you don't have to go back and retake the quiz. First thing that I saw when I looked at your quizzes is that when you're looking through the questions, the answers you were giving looked like you had not really read the text. So if I were you, I would go in, make sure, and on top of reading the text, this section gives you a lot of historical background, like what were the Greek influences, what beliefs did they hold dear, and some of the questions that they're asking have to do with what you learned in the previous lessons. So make sure you're taking notes, make sure you're writing down vocabulary, and use those for the quizzes. The next thing is that I want you, like let's say we look at this question. This gives you the answers, but so I'm only going to show you this one. So you read through, make sure you go back and really look at the text. I'm not going to look at this question with you, but click on, go back to the excerpt, make sure you look at the questions or the characters. Make sure you look at each piece that the text is giving you because this is important for each section. Okay? All right. So read through the text carefully and take your time and make sure you've done all the work beforehand before you get to the test, because these are not easy. This is not where you can just skim or skip a bunch of sections and move on and pass. You're going to have to listen to the lessons and take notes and learn the material so that you can pass the test. Now let's look at some of the questions that you particularly had a hard time with on the last quiz you took, the last version of it. So it gives you a section, it gives you an excerpt. If it gives you a big excerpt like that, I would read through the excerpt first, then look at the question, and really go through each, because you're having difficulty on these quizzes, take your time. If you take your time and look at each answer and really look at what the question is asking you, it might take you a little longer per question, but you're going to have a better chance of getting the right answer, and then you won't have to waste your time going back and taking these tests over and over. All right, so first I want to read the excerpt. Who is he? Okay, so if we had read the whole thing or you listened to your lessons, you know that he is Odysseus. Okay, he saw the townlands and learned the minds of many distant men. So he went on a journey. We know from our earlier lessons he's an epic hero. He goes on a journey and weathered. What does the word weathered mean? Well, it means that he weathered many bitter nights and days. So he had bitter times on his journey. It was a hard journey, but he weathered it. He stayed strong. He persevered through the difficult times that he had in his deep heart at sea while he fought. What does it mean to fight through? He fought only to save his life to bring his shipmates home. He fought hard against those monsters that came against him or the tribulations on the journey. That means he was brave. But not by will nor valor could he save them, for their own recklessness destroyed them all. Even though he was brave and he fought hard for them, they made their own decisions that ended up killing them in the end. Children and fools they killed and feasted on the cattle of Lord Helios. He's the sun god, Lord Helios, the sun, and he who moves all day through heaven. So that is they're explaining who moves all day through heaven. Who does that? Well, that's Zeus. That's the god, okay? So took from their eyes the dawn of their return. No matter what they wanted to do, Zeus had the power, the god had the power to take that away from them because of what they did. Of these adventures, Muse, daughter of Zeus, the Muses, they would call it the Muses to give them inspiration because these gods had such power, they could give that to them. Tell us in our time, lift the great song again. Okay, so we took just a few minutes to break down the lines to see what they were saying. Homer, because Homer wrote this we think we know he verbally wrote it first. He told the story first. So let's look at the question. What can be learned about the ancient Greeks from this excerpt? Let's look at each answer and see if what we just discussed is in any of these answers. They established the first democratic government. Well, that may be true, but is that what this excerpt is speaking about? Have we talked anything about organized government? No. So that's not an answer. They contributed to art, science, and philosophy. That might be true as well, but did we see that here? Did we see Odysseus creating art or being creative and think about science and the philosophy? No, he's focused on getting home. That's what he's focused on. So that's not art, science, and philosophy, not in this passage. They valued perseverance, bravery, and strength. He weathered storms. He fought to get his men home. He did everything he could to save his life and bring them home. He had will. He had valor. He was brave. He was strong. He tried to fight against them. He persevered, but he still couldn't, not because of his own self, but because of others' actions. But he was brave and had strength, so he made it home. Would that show that they valued perseverance, bravery, and strength? Yes. They believed the gods were active in people's lives. Who kept them from coming home? Zeus. All right, so those two would be correct answers. They emphasized the importance of physical fitness. Now, did they think bravery, yes, but anywhere here are they talking about, running 10 miles after he got home? No. The focus here is perseverance, bravery, and strength, and they believe the gods were active in people's lives. And if you take the time to break down those lines and look at what the question is asking you, then you're going to have a better chance of getting the correct answer. Because I think you could have picked that up if you would have taken the time. Let's look at the next one. Let's look at the question before we read this piece. This excerpt is an example of which value important to ancient Greek society. Now, what's going to happen on these tests is they're going to give you answers that you've probably heard in your previous lessons. Did the Greeks, did they value hospitality? Absolutely. I guarantee they talked about this in a lesson because it's something that Homer conveyed over and over again in Odysseus's journey. Did they value generosity? Yes, they did. Those who were greedy were not able to go home. Perseverance. Did they want you to persevere? We just talked about that. Yes. And did they value family ties and being loyal to your family? Yes. So all of these are things that Greeks valued. Those words are going to pop up in your head, but they are asking, what does this excerpt? What is it saying about it? So we have to look. Then, throwing his arms around this marvel of a father, Telemachus began to weep. Who's Telemachus? Telemachus is Odysseus, because he's the father, Odysseus' son. Right off the bat, we're talking about a father and son. This is probably going to be close. Salt tears rose from the wells of longing in both men. They've missed that connection of father and son. They've missed each other, their family. And cries burst from both, as keen and fluttering as those of the great taloned hawk, whose nesting farmers take before they fly. What? Like nestings are what? They compared Telemachus and the father's cries, Odysseus' cries, just as those as the hawk. What are nestings? What's in a nest? Babies. The farmers take those babies away, take it from the taloned hawk, and that hawk is desperate just like these two men are. This entire passage is talking about what? That's not being hospitable or generous or to persevere. That's talking about the connection you have with your family and how important that bond is. Now, if you took the time, what is the question asking me? What is each answer saying? But what do I see in the excerpt? I think you would have gotten that answer. One more. Let's look at the question first. Which is the most? If there's a bolded word, you definitely want to pay attention to the word. So which is the most effective paraphrase? What's a paraphrase? It means it takes these words. Summary would be summarizing the entire passage, but paraphrase is basically taking what is said in each line and putting them in your own words, in different words, okay? So let's look. Plunder we took. What's plunder? Plunder is taking something that's not yours. So that's being greedy. And we enslaved the women. Greed again. You're taking something that's not yours. To make division. Okay, so this is you're causing issues. Equal shares to all. But on the spot, I told them. Who's I? Odysseus. Back and quickly. So Odysseus is telling them to stop, back quickly, out to sea again. Quit what you're doing. Let's go back to sea. My men were mutinous. Mutinous means they go against what their leader says. Who's their leader? Odysseus. My men were mutinous, fools, on stores of wine. So they did not listen to Odysseus. They didn't return. Okay. And sheep after sheep they butchered by the surf, and shambling cattle, feasting. They're being greedy. They're continuing to do what Odysseus told them not to do. To call to arms the main force of the Cicones. So, fugitives went inland to come back with more help of these men who are doing what their leader told them not to. All right. So let's look at what is the most effective paraphrase. What all those pieces we talked about, we should see in whatever answer we choose. A, when Odysseus and his men arrived on the island of the Cicones, they enslaved women and feasted on the sheep and cattle they had butchered by the sea. Who did the feasting and the butchering and the enslaving? We just talked about it. Who told them not to? Odysseus did not do that. The men did. So this is not effective because it does not portray what we just said happened in this passage. Odysseus told them to quit, but that doesn't tell us that in this answer, so that's not correct. Next, although Odysseus tells his men that they need to return quickly to the ship, the men are too busy dividing their findings into equal shares for everyone. Does that happen? Yeah, they're doing that, but does that really give us the picture of each thing? It gives one piece, but I'm not sure, but let's keep that as an option. So we're just going to think maybe that's an option. Next, Odysseus warns his men to return to the ship, but many of the men did not listen and instead ran inland to see what else they could take for themselves. So the first part of this is right. Odysseus tells his men to return quickly. Who runs back into Who runs back in? The fugitives go inland, running to call to the arms. The fugitives are those, that's not the men. They aren't going to see what else they can take for themselves. So that's misinterpreting the passage. So that's not correct. Last one. The men continued their acts of greed. Did they keep on over and over again? Did we just talk about that? Continuous, even though Odysseus told them not to. Despite Odysseus' commands to stop, yes, and return to the ship, and the fugitives of Cicones ran inland to fetch help. Yes, that's exactly what happened, what we just talked about when we broke it down. So the correct answer is D. What I want you to do is I want you to make sure you understand the lessons that have been about the Odyssey. Make sure you understand those pieces. Make sure you take your time with each question. Break down, read the question first, break down your passage, and then look at each piece. This took us several minutes, these questions, but we would have gotten them correct and we won't have to go back and retake the quiz over and over again. Okay? Let me know if this helps. If not, and you want to ask me a specific question about the text, then we can hold a Zoom lesson. Just let me know. Even if it's after 1:30, I know it's getting close to that time. I'm available today, so I can hold that with you. Okay? Good luck, LaBrice. Let me know how it goes. Bye-bye.